Salve, people of the universe, my name is Lord Salvatore, and today I want to talk to you guys about something that's been bothering me for quite a while now, and it's the death of meaning. Now, you might already kind of know what I'm going for here if you have been paying attention to the world around you. Things that have a meaning are getting scarcer, and things that used to mean a lot now mean very much less. And we're talking about very obvious things like the sexual revolution, making something like intimacy almost a product, and capitalism does the same thing to it. This is not a criticism of capitalism alone, but it is something worth pointing out. And I personally think that the real problem is this: people don't want to take responsibility for what they're doing. So you'll see something like, for example, someone says, and if you think the way that I'm about to describe, I want you to stick around and hear me out on this. So some people say that consent to sexual intercourse does not mean consent to pregnancy. But the problem is that that takes away the consequential nature of the action you're taking. If I tell someone, oh yeah, I purposefully and with my own consent, decided to drive a car into a park, but I did not consent to hitting people, so why were they in front of me? You know, that's not how that works. You can't... And some people might say, yeah, but that's different because you're talking about someone else with agency, and no matter whether or not you think that a fetus is alive, it doesn't have the agency to choose. But I think that makes it worse. It's like that people give the example of the trolley problem, where they say like someone is laying on the tracks, and because they're laying on the tracks, you have to pull the lever and choose: are you going to kill one person or let it keep killing 5 people? And that's a numbers game to me. Now my sister, she says that she doesn't feel like she's the one who should do anything, for example, right? So she doesn't feel responsible. But to me, this is a very weak way of looking at the world, and it's ultimately destructive to yourself as well. Because if you don't attribute yourself as someone who has the authority to take actions upon the calculations that you're making, or in the world around you, because you don't want to be the one responsible, that just says that you don't want to make a small moral sacrifice for the sake of actually helping people. And to me, that sounds very selfish. That sounds like something that an authoritarian would do. You know, you preserve yourself over the others because you don't want to have to deal with the consequences. But if I had to kill one person to save 5 other people that were innocent, then I'd do it. You know, if all of them were equally innocent, then that's just the way it works. It's a simple calculation. And it's me who has to bear the responsibility of not just doing that, but to live afterwards and understand I didn't have much of another choice. But this is what I mean. People will remove the meaning from themselves. They don't want to be responsible for their own actions. So the only way to not be responsible for your actions is to take away how much an action means. So they say that something is social and not just natural, or they say something is social and not just biological, social and not just spiritual, social and not just and that's been like the argument that a lot of people use for a lot of things. That because something is a social construct, it somehow doesn't mean anything. It's all just subjective. And I had this running joke for a while with my friends where I was like, everything's subjective, innit? You know, like that. Because that's the argument that these people use. They don't believe in objectivism. They don't believe in moral objectivism. They don't believe in scientific objectivism. They think that everything is... And their argument is this. Their argument is like, oh, but, you know, people still find out that sometimes sciences are wrong. Yes, they do. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be treated as correct when something is figured out. That's like saying, because we figured out something is this, we're not going to accept that anything is anything. And that's a really weird argument to make, right? But the death of meaning is more than just about sex and whether a life is worth living or stuff like that. It goes beyond that, and it goes to very small things too. Things in your daily life that you might not realize. And I'm gonna start with one of the more obvious ones: movies. Movies have lost meaning. Movies are so often made for nostalgia bait, and not just movies, TV shows too. Nostalgia bait, and there's fan service, of course. There's barely any TV series you can see nowadays that doesn't have some sort of sex scene, and there's barely any TV series nowadays that doesn't have a cameo from another character, from some in-universe other movie or story or whatever. And whilst I understand trying to create a cohesive universe, I agree with that. I think we're gonna do the same for a lot of our content on the Thai team channels, but it's very different when you are trying to make something stand out on its own. And this is also why I don't really like spin-offs and prequels, because you already know how the story's gonna end with prequels anyway, so that doesn't really matter to me. But then when you're talking about actual spin-offs, those often fail because they rely so heavily on cameos. And even if the series itself is good, you know that the cameos are part of what makes it good. And, you know, like, if it works, sure, but it's not gonna have longevity. And to look at a series that has like 1 season or 2 seasons and be like, well, this is gonna end quickly because, you know, the cameos can only work for so long, to me that just feels really boring. It feels really like, oh, I'm just watching a 2 season. And, you know, I'm not saying that everything needs to go on forever to be good, but it does kind of make you feel like you're just waiting for the end, you know, because that's all it really has going for it. It can have a great story next to it, sure, but a great story isn't enough nowadays. If you just needed a great story, then people would be reading more books, but that's not how it works. People need to be engaged. You need music. You need... how many TV shows and movies get popular partially because of their soundtrack? You know, the graphical aspect of it, the movement, the emotional beats, those need to be all correct, and that's why... You know, like, and I'm saying this as someone who writes books myself. The amount of times people have accused me of using AI to write my books, simply because I use, like, lists, just dot point lists in some of my books. But, you know, that's what I'm trying to say here. Like, it's, people don't trust media unless they can see it, and even then they're suspicious of it as well. This also means, this is also part of what takes away the meaning, right? Which is, when Hollywood starts using AI for VFX, to replace VFX basically, and when Hollywood starts using AI to produce actual content, it's gonna be clear that they're doing it, but the general audience might just gobble it up. But there's no quality control. So what we're dealing with is a world that increasingly decreases in quality, increasingly lacks responsibility, and increasingly tries to justify, but I feel this, or I'm not okay with this, I'm not ready for that. And this is also why a lot of people break up in relationships or divorce, because they say, oh, I'm not ready for this right now. And it's like, why didn't you tell them beforehand? You could have figured it out way before, right? This is also why I wrote the song Romance is Dead about that exact thing, which is on the Melancholyric channel. If you want to check that out, please do so. Melancholyric is also tagged in my description. So, this is the part, right? This is the part where I'm like, it gets to the point where I think everyone knows what I'm talking about now, but this is the part that I'm most concerned about right here. If all meaning is gone, and people stop taking responsibility, and everything becomes more tribalist, and every, you know, person that votes for a specific party or side focuses mostly on what is most important to them, the one singular issue, aren't we going to end up with a world ruled by people who aren't necessarily there to help or do anything good? Isn't the world going to end up being ruled by people who don't care about meaning, who don't see meaning in your life. Think about that for a second. When we glorify this way of thinking, where you don't have to take responsibility, where actions aren't consequential, where nothing has meaning, life has no meaning, sex has no meaning, love has no meaning, it's all just physical, end of the line stuff. If that's really the way that we see the world, where there's no point to it at all, how many more people will kill themselves? How many more people will rule the world just in order to satisfy their temporary desires and ultimately still feel terrible? This is what I'm genuinely asking, and they're not going to care about your life because you've removed meaning and responsibility, because that's what we're glorifying now. So the quiet death of meaning isn't so quiet when you think about it, but it's not being spoken of. And I think it's because it's a very uncomfortable truth, an uncomfortable topic for people to tackle. So this might seem all doom and gloom, so let's get into what I think we can do about this. I think first of all we need to recognize is that our actions have consequences, and we need to take responsibility for those consequences. You can't have sex with someone, get pregnant, and then say, well, I didn't consent to being pregnant. No, you chose to have sex with someone. That is where and you chose to do it in a specific way as well, right? There's many ways you could have done something that wouldn't have resulted in this. And then besides that, there is, of course, the return of purity. We need to bring back a sense of purity. And I'm not just talking in the way that people often associate with religion and stuff. I'm talking about a way of a purity in code, a knight's code, an honor code, where we treat people with the same respect that we'd like to be treated with again, and where we see the value in people's lives and don't just treat strangers as strangers, but as fellow beings on this planet. And I'm not saying that in a hippie way, I'm saying that in a just being decent way, to actually get the right results as well for humanity. So this is what I think we can do about it. Get your hobbies, use those to control your feelings, work on your relationships, see value in the relationships you have that aren't always romantic or sexual. I think that's an important part, strengthening those, having fun with people in those ways. So that's basically it for now. Thank you all for watching. Please subscribe if you like more of these kind of philosophical or psychological videos. And we're going to be doing other videos here too, including a podcast soon. So stick around for that. Like this video, and we'll see you guys